So this is really exciting. What a group tonight. Thank you all for being here. I'm Tom Hogan, the coordinator of the Milwaukie Poetry Series, and I want to welcome you here tonight. This event is co-sponsored with the St. John the Evangelist Episcopal Church in Milwaukie, and my co-host Mary Detman wasn't able to be with us tonight, so I'm making a welcome for both of us. And I want to say just thank you for being here, because we know there's a lot of choices. And there's a lot of things that you could be doing, and you're choosing to come and spend the time with us and read poetry and hear poetry. Also a comment about Zoom. I think we've all seen a lot of events on Zoom, and we want to say, when are we going to be back in person? And this is the kind of event that Zoom allows us to have. So we really appreciate being able to host the Ashland Poetry Group as our featured readers. We're going to hear from them a little bit, and Zoom allows us to have the capacity to do that. I want to make some thanks. Thanks to the city of Milwaukie, because our group has been sponsored and supported by the city of Milwaukie since we started, and we're just ending our 15th year. Thanks to the Letting Library, because we've had a lot of support from the Letting Library and from the Milwaukie Poetry Series Committee. Many of you know we do have a committee, so something doesn't happen unless you have a group of people working on that. We have a new website, and maybe some of you have seen it, so we're getting more information on that, but we're excited to have a new website. I did mention earlier, our next season is coming up. I just finished getting the readers scheduled into the months that they're going to be reading. So our schedule is going to be out in a couple of weeks. I would like to say sometime between the 15th and the 20th of August. And we are going to be going back to in-person. We're going to be in person at the Letting Library in Milwaukie on September 14th. So we're also very excited about that. And we're going to try to live stream that. We will get that up and running sometime during the season, and we hope it's in September. Our next event too, the September 1st Friday, is also going to be live as well. And we're going to have that at a location in Milwaukie, Milwaukie Floral. So there'll be an invitation out about that. It'll be on Zoom. We hope it'll be on Zoom, being as that it's live, but it's going to be September 2nd. One other thing I said I'd make an announcement for, or about, and this is for the Clackamas County Literary Arts Committee. I'm a member of the Clackamas County Literary Arts Committee, and the purpose of it, of course, is to support writers and to encourage writers. And if there are those of you who are in Clackamas County and are interested in hearing more about that or joining that group, please put something in chat or send me an email, and I will follow up on that, because we are looking for some more members. And for those of you in counties that have a literary arts committee, please support them. And if you don't, it's really something to think about. So that's about the Clackamas County Literary Arts Committee. Well, let's move to what we're going to do and how we're going to proceed tonight. We have four great featured readers from the Ashland Poetry Group. What we're going to do is that I am going to introduce Vince and then hand it off to the group. Vince is going to introduce Patty. Patty is going to introduce Steve, I believe. And Steve is going to introduce Amy. And then after Amy reads, we'll come back with the open mic. We'll see how many people want to read in the open mic. And I am actually looking for my
You want me to introduce myself, Tom?
introduction for Vince. Well, here it is. You know, I was thinking about that. I could have said, It's my pleasure to introduce Vince Wixon. He's going to introduce himself. But I did find this. And Vince Wixon's most recent book of poetry is Laying By, published by Flowstone Press in 2017. In the late 80s and early 90s, he co-produced videos on William Stafford, collecting on one DVD, William Stafford, Life and Poems. After William Stafford's death, Vince and Patty Wixon helped set up the William Stafford Archives. Vince helped make the first cut of poems for the Staffords, The Way It Is, selected in New Poems with Paul Merchant. With Paul, he edited 3 other Stafford books, including Sound of the Axe, a collection of Stafford aphorisms and aphoristic poems. On the Stafford Archives website, you can read Vince and Paul Merchant's article, William Stafford and His First Publishers, The Making of West of Your City and Traveling Through the Dark. I've been looking forward to this. I always love to hear Vince read. It's my pleasure to introduce our first featured reader tonight, Vince Wixon.
Thank you, Tom.
And please, would everyone mute themselves while the featured readers are reading?
We ready?
We're ready.
Okay.
Nice.
Well, thanks for that thorough introduction, and thanks all of you for listening tonight. Patty and I are smoke exiles in Portland for a few days, so we feel a little bit like frauds reading with Amy and Steve, toughing it out there in Ashland and Medford, but we're heading home soon because our relatives are tiring of us. For my part, I'm going to read 3 of my poems and then 2 by others. First poem is called Distraction, and it's about as topical as I get. 2 things to mention in the poem. Spiral is a French police procedural series that some of you may have watched. And the word flic is a French slang term for cops. Distraction. Explosions, fires, infections keep us awake at night, so we avoid watching the news. We watch mysteries in other languages, strain to read the subtitles as they flash by. What's the motive? We have means, opportunity, weapon, but no motive. Let's get out there and knock on doors, people. A few months from now, we'll watch them again. We won't remember who did it, but someone did. Something will be resolved. That's where we are now, leaning back in our easy chairs.
Vince, you've muted yourself.
Okay. Am I there now? Am I unmuted, Amy?
Yes, you are.
Thank you. The last stanza. The beleaguered fleets in cars and on scooters are pursuing suspects through Paris, and we'll lose them. We know how this turns out. They always lose them. After Robert Bly's death last November, I wrote a number of poems prompted by lines from some of his, mainly in the books, Morning Poems, and This Tree Will Last for 1,000 Years. Grove. Looking up, I see the farmyards with their groves, the pines somber, made for winter. They knew it would come. Robert Bly. When winter enters the grove surrounding the farmyard, separating empty fields from buildings and people, the silence unsettles. Deer bunch up for warmth. The shadows of the black trunks and limbs of the cottonwood and box elder spread across the snow as it begins to cover the earth, then pile up. The pines' inconsequential smudges disappear into dusk. Grateful for neglect, small creatures hunker down in the refuge made by the windfall the farmer and his sons didn't clear after the harvest. In the farmhouse, the family bending over soup bowls as if in prayer, no, none of this. In their ignorance, they feel safe, and for an instant, believe they may live forever. My last poem of mine is a poem for the long married, or about the long married. One thing to mention in this poem is Weimaraner, which are, most of you know probably, are large hunting dogs. Romantic notions. One year on Valentine's Day, my father bought my mother a rototiller, a small one she could handle, unlike their half-horse tiller that dragged her across the garden. Maybe not a romantic gift, but my parents were long married, and she loved nothing more than gardening, vegetables, of course. It was a farm, but also 4 long rows of gladioli, her favorite flower, stately and colorful, which won prizes at the Methodist Flower Show. The Valentine's Day Weimaraner was another matter. My mother loved dogs too, but didn't hunt. My father, busy milking cows morning and night and in the fields the rest of the day, didn't hunt enough to work the dog. Duke, he was called, a dog of regal appearance and excessive energy, who had to be leashed on a long rope to hold him from running the field's length, barking and flushing the birds. "Come back here, Duke, come back, you son of a bitch," my father would yell. Being bred for it, Duke had a nose for hunting. When early pheasant season opened west of us, he would run the 1/4 mile to the gas station on the edge of town and jump in pickups heading to South Dakota. My dad would get a call, "Andy, come get your dog. He's hitching rides again." My mother died first, then my father a few months later. After his funeral, we found a short letter in a metal box. "Dearest," he wrote 3 days before their wedding, "Gee, I'm so happy that sometimes I can't believe it's true. I realize that we'll have tough going for a while, but having a home and each other all to ourselves is worth it 100 times over. Let's call it the era of love." Well, it was wonderful and surprising to find this letter because as far as I knew, my father had never written a letter. And to read one in which he said, "Gee," and let's call it the era of love was astounding and gratifying. So 2 poems by others. The first one, a very familiar one, but always worth hearing, by William Stafford, that speaks to all of us about our assignment in our life, our vocation. Vocation. This dream the world is having about itself includes a trace on the plains of the Oregon Trail, a groove in the grass my father showed us all one day when meadowlarks were trying to tell something better about to happen. I dreamed the trace to the mountains, over the hills, and there a girl who belonged wherever she was. But then my mother called us back to the car. She was afraid. She always blamed the place, the time, anything my father planned. Now both of my parents, the long line through the plain, the meadowlarks, the sky, the world's whole dream remain. And I hear him saying while I stand between the two, helpless, both of them part of me. Your job is to find what the world is trying to be. Second poem is by the nation's new poet laureate, Ada Limon. It's from her 2018 book, The Carrying, which NPR referred to as a much needed shot of, if not hope, then perseverance amidst uncertainty. The Last Drop. And for just listening to the poem might be a little confusing, because there are a number of people mentioned. This is spoken to the speaker's lover in this case. The Last Drop. You've just left your dad in Virginia with your brother after taking him to the neurologist to confirm that it is in fact Alzheimer's. Now you're driving to New York to get your dead ex-girlfriend's cats who need a home. And even though we weren't planning on cats, they're 15 and who's going to take them? And you know them already. And why not give some animals a home, even if it's another 20 hours of driving there and back? I tell Manuel about your travels and he says, it's a good premise for a horrible road trip dark comedy movie. And there is something funny about it all. Your father hates cats, but they love him. And I spent a long time envious of your ex-girlfriend's beauty. And now I only miss her and want to love her cats for her. My memoir could be titled, a memoir could be titled, Everything Was Fine Until It Wasn't. My memoir could be called, I thought I wanted a baby, but all I got was your dead ex-girlfriend's 2 old cats. My memoir could be called, Before the Wedding, You Must Suffer a Little. My mother's motto is, nothing is easy, and I tease her for it, but it's true. Before he left, your dad said he didn't understand the saying, good to the last drop. Does that mean the last drop is bad? He asked. No, I reassured. It means all of it is good. Every single drop of it is good. And that is a nice segue introducing the next reader, Patty Wixon, whom I've loved for 47 years. But she also writes poems. And her latest book of poems is The Great Hunt and Other Poems, which is full of really good poems, but it doesn't include any recipes. Her previous book, Dear Spoon, has a lot of good poems too, but it also has family recipes for rhubarb pie, fresh peach pie with chocolate coated crust, Aunt Rachel's sugar cookies, and other basic foods. Patty Wixon.
Thank you, Vince. And I'm very pleased to have Amy sitting in there for me on the Zoom photo.
I'm going to put it on gallery, I guess, or something. I don't know. You go ahead.
Okay. With all the discussion these days about the rights women have gained in just 3 short generations and the importance of voting, I want to begin with why Grandma votes. She took advanced math classes in high school, the only girl in the room. The counselor said, if you want a job, choose nursing or teaching, art or home ec, not math. After school, she worked at Bullock's shoe store, memorized the stock, how to measure, stood tall, stiff-spined when men backed out the door saying, I'll come back later for a man to help me. Summers, swimming, she beat boys in races, but college water teams had no women, so she joined synchronized swimming, held 3-minute breaths for spinning water wheels, circling 3 or 4 times. The only woman in fly fishing class, she missed an A in the final, not knowing Johnson was a leading brand of outdoor motors, but earned it back casting a dry fly half the length of the football field. My next poem uses several of my experiences. It's called Cockroaches. Right here on the table, a bowl of cockroaches, high protein appetizer prepared by our pharmacist. I couldn't bite into one to hear the crunch of the double fried body, Taiwanese style. The sound in Anchorage when a family from Costa Rica moved in next door and cockroaches came along in their couch, settled into cracks leading from their kitchen to ours. Hundreds of pale pebbles skittering through walls, seeking crumbs and heat, barely resembling their giant cousins, shiny chestnut brown in Florida, the night when I turned on a light, startling one 2 inches long, rushing at me. I yanked up my nightgown for fear it'd get trapped, scurry up my leg instead of racing back underneath beneath the floorboard. I hear that same scuttle of legs and wings in the college lab. My job, tending gallon jars of them, their chromosome change so human-like, they were perfect for research. Twice a day, I held the gas nozzle under jar lids, reached in to refill vials of water before the huge bugs came too, clacking wings, swinging feelers, swirling around the glass, frantic to catch hold. Now in Taiwan, I look over other options, decide on a pill of ground cockroach, a cure for sick stomach or heart or liver, a pill without a sound or scent, just a swallow and it's gone. My third poem will be on reading War and Peace, another early experience. On reading War and Peace. The summer I was 16, the doctor said pleurisy, a 2 months of bed rest. Get yourself a long book, a classic. The first week I read Time about Claire Booth Luce. I wanted my life like hers, important adventures, ambassador to Italy, ambassador to Brazil. I knew nothing of other countries. I opened War and Peace. Each sunny morning, I rubbed on Johnson's baby oil, stretched out on my stomach atop the picnic table, the book in the shadow of my head, and shivered in snow and ice while my skin broiled. Afternoons on the porch, I sat against a pillar, but accompanied Natasha in drawing rooms in St. Petersburg. When I read her name, I said it slowly, Natasha. I tried renaming Penny Ardot, but she wouldn't come. I thought about Tolstoy's speech is silver, but silence is golden. Decided it meant think long before speaking. As weeks went by, I learned the power of silence. Guns not firing, floorboards upstairs not creaking, no sound in the room after he left and slammed the door. My poems by other poets, I'm going to begin with E. Ethelbert Miller, a poet who read in Ashland several years ago for a writer's series there. And since then we followed his poetry, and I wanted to read this recent one. Crossing the Line for Maria. Sitting across the table from you, I think back to when our friendship came down from the mountains. It was a cold day and the miners had not left for work. You break a cookie in half like bread, and this sharing is what we both now need. That which breaks in the crumbs are memories. Your gray hair cut short and you ask if I notice. How can I tell you that Bolivia will always be beautiful and everything I notice is you, and yes, you. Our napkins folded in our hands, folded as if our meeting now is prayer. Did I ever tell you that your eyes are a map and I would lose myself if you ever turned away? Often we select, I like to select a poem from a recent book by a poet, such as Blood Moon by Patricia Kirkpatrick. And her poem, I feel like, is very relevant to current events. The Border. The world will soon break up into small colonies of the saved. Robert Bly. They begin taking children from their parents. We already know the story. It's like, you know the one. where there isn't enough food or safety. At night, a brother and sister seized, get sent to the woods, a swamp, the desert. They might have stones or crumbs in their pockets. Sometimes they get bread, sometimes milk or berries. The border marks a line the way a strike of lightning leaves one house standing, burns down the next. For some children, there's nothing but ashes and scraps. That's how much the border matters when you reach the makeshift tables, when you're questioned in a language you don't understand, when a witch squeezing a bony finger figures out how to profit. Terror begins a jangle of keys and belts. The children go in cages. My last poem by another poet is by Ada Lamont, and from her 2015 book, Bright Dead Things. It's really hard to choose one poem from her books because there's dozens and dozens that are worth reading again and again. What it looks like to us and the words we use. All these great barns out here in the outskirts, black creosote boards knee deep in the bluegrass. They look so artfully abandoned, even in use. You say they look like arks after the seas dried up. I say they look like pirate ships. And I think of the walk in my valley where Jay said, "You don't believe in God?" And I said, "No, I believe in this connection we all have to nature, to each other, to the universe." And she said, "Yeah, God." And how we stood there, low beasts among the white oaks, Spanish moss and spider webs, obsidian shards stuck in our pockets, woodpecker flurry, and I refused to call it so. So instead, we looked up at the unruly sky, its clouds in simple animal shapes we could name, though we knew they were really just clouds, disorderly and marvelous and ours. Wanted to thank you, Tom, again for inviting me to be part of this group of Southern Oregon poets. And now I have the pleasure of introducing Steve Diefenbacher. Steve Diefenbacher's poems are inspired by his Latin American childhood and his love of the American West. A journalist by trade, he worked for papers in La Grande and Medford. His full-length book of poems, The Sky is a Bird of Sorrow, published in 2012, won a Forward Review's Book of the Year award. He also won the Cloudbank Magazine Poetry Prize in 2010. Besides his full-size collection, he has 3 chapbooks, At the Boundary, Universe of the Unsaid, and Intimations. Steve?
Thank you, Patty, and thank you so much, Tom, for, well, this series of readings and having an open mic afterward. It really expands the reach of poetry, and I think it's a great thing you're doing. Now, I guess I'm going to have to start with an apology because I didn't come up with other poets to read. I thought it was optional, but I could come up with one pretty easily because behind me is a whole stack of books of poets. So give me a minute and I'll just grab one, okay? Just so I can have at least one that's not mine. So I'm going to just read one of my favorite poets because, and yeah, this poem probably will be familiar to a number of you. If I can find it. Actually, I think I could go anywhere in this book and pick one and it would be fine. So let me find one that's relatively short. The poet is Pablo Neruda, who it was one of my inspirations when I really came back to poetry in my later years. I'm trying to find one that's short, but okay, here's one that probably a lot of us can relate to. And it's one that I don't think I've read this one actually. So it's called Fear, El Miedo. Everyone is after me to jump through hoops, whoop it up, play football, rush about, even go swimming and flying. Fair enough. Everyone is after me to take it easy. They all make doctor's appointments for me, eyeing me in that quizzical way. What is going on? Everyone is after me to take a trip, to come in, to leave, not to travel, to die, and alternatively not to die. It does not matter. Everyone is spotting oddnesses in my innards, suddenly shocked by radial awful diagrams. I do not agree. Everyone is picking at my poetry with their relentless knives and forks, trying, no doubt, to find a fly. I am afraid. I am afraid of the whole world, afraid of cold water, afraid of death. I am, as all mortals are, unable to be patient. And so in these brief passing days, I shall not take them into account. I shall open up and closet myself with my most treacherous enemy, Pablo Neruda. So I'm going to start my part of the reading with, it's fire season here in Southern Oregon and probably in most of Oregon now. And this poem is actually part of a series that I wrote during my years in La Grande, working for the newspaper there. And this series has to do with journalism in rural Oregon and some of the people that I interviewed there and trying to get their take on the world, which I thought was one of the best things about my time there, was getting a rural perspective on life. Smoke jumpers. On the tower, the tanned and lean leader makes his assessments, watching the men glide along a rope to their landings, rolling and rising when they touch down. He notices the ones who are afraid but willing, the ones with false courage and easy smiles, who might crumble when they've plunged into a ropeless sky, and the calm ones he'll rely on in what happens below. Patience and focus, he says, is what I look for. Some will get rattled, others get lazy handling the gear, the packs, Pulaskis, saws, and helmets that must be in perfect order before they go. In the building, he points out error after error, saying, this isn't good enough, as he reveals that his staff may be cut next year. Forcing hard choices, he says, nodding back at the names above each bundle. Gathering outside, I hear their voices. The muscular one who'd worked at an agency in DC and never been fit in his life till now. The wiry blonde one who'd parachuted into a tree and worked his way down in time to help the team. Near the end, a quiet one told me how his squad had once fled to the nearest river when the heat and smoke became unbearable. Sparks passing over them, forcing a march through ash all night to reach a road at dawn. I thought back on the view from that tower as I listened, the already brown grass stretching past runways into the valley, the mantles of healthy pine drying below high ridges, the sky still blue and clear with summer. All of us are looking for places of consolation or solace in these times. In addition to fire season, we have COVID still and all the other things that are happening in the world. So this poem is it doesn't really mention those specifically, but this is my place of consolation. I love to swim. Backstroke. Here I float between universes on all that is glassy and buoyant. Below is the pool's white concrete, a fishbowl sea layered over bald earth, self-contained and homey. Above, movements of the possible stretch into deepening blue in glossy sunlight. Ivory nimbuses become Sioux realities, dragons of vapor, gray-backed bulls, the topless towers of Ilium. It's then I think I could be in limbo forever, drift through any season, neither fruitful nor passive, arms rotating or not, feet fluttering or still, in surface tensions of the in-between to blur the bounds of difference. I grew up in Latin America. I was born in the United States, but spent 13 years down there. And even though I didn't read the magical realism novels until much later, something about being in that place and with a different perspective, a different language, and so on, it made me have the sense of a shifting reality. And so once in a while, I just like to write a poem that's strange in some ways. I start with a possible story and see where it takes me. For a little while, during the beginning of the pandemic, I actually wrote a series of apocalypse poems. Yeah, something really great like that to cheer you up. But it actually was a very cathartic thing for me. And so this one is about cairns, which also are symbols of many things. They're symbols of they're actually helpful piles of rocks to mark a trail. They're boundaries, they can mark boundaries. And they also can be used as statuaries. I see some very beautiful assemblages. And so this, however, is different. This is the apocalypse of cairns. Beyond the gate of a ruined cottage, mountains in the distance, cairns multiply on rough grass. Their sharp, dominant obelisks of chosen stone, holding light between the seams, consciously a kilter. One block against another, like stacks of wave-cast shells. No one knows who built them. Back-to-earthers, perhaps from the hills, children bent on haunting mischiefs, or people from the stars, signaling through symbols what they might expect from human pathfinders. No one approaches them or dares take them down, as if each were a tower of secret purpose or worth, if only to test our semblance of order, showing how discord can arrive unheard and age into the familiar. And my final poem is actually, I wrote this poem a number of years ago, but the marvelous pictures from the Webb telescope reminded me of it. And I thought, I'm going to read this one because it just fascinated me seeing what they can do now with space telescopes. And I have to tell a little short anecdote because I got the idea for the story from an essay by Lauren Isley. And he mentions this just briefly, but there was a scientist who studied the elementary particles of matter. And as he got older and older, he became very fearful and worried because he realized that there was more space in the universe than there was matter. So he bought these really big shoes so that he wouldn't fall through the vacuum of space. He saw the porous truth of himself at last, the pale hands of night reaching beyond the floor. As he walked heavily through gleaming rooms, he filled with oil lanterns in tapered glass, candles consuming themselves in flame to hold back the darkness. He felt their naked and ghostly reality in him, those black gaps like fingers in melting glass, atoms transfigured by doubt, coiling out until everything he knew was riddled with openings. He wanted to see this truth as freedom, his life released at last from its heavy port, his body a bright ribbon of dust in a nostrum of the all. But then his mind began to float too, each thought glinting away as he realized the shoes could never hold, that every pull of the void drew from them as well, every nucleus a tiny spinning bird, neutrons flowing in slow, silent waves from him and the cloak he wore even in sleep to keep his body in. And then his body was gone, his consciousness a mere wisp of cloud, believing it had lived sometime, somewhere in a husk of bone and heart, even as it swiveled toward the faraway gulfs, the wayward arc of vanishing galaxies, senseless and burdened in their wild mystery of becoming. Well, it's with great pleasure that I introduce Amy Miller, who is a good friend of mine, as well as the other readers tonight. So it's really nice to read among friends and then finding some new friends with those who check in. Amy has had a very successful string of years and won a number of numerous awards. Her latest one is the Chad Walsh Chapbook Prize from Beloit Poetry Journal, and it was for her book, Astronauts. And her full-length collection, The Trouble with New England Girls, won the 2017 Lewis Award from Concrete Wolf Press. Her poems have appeared in Barrow Street, Copper Nickel, Narrative, Terrain, Tupelo Quarterly, and many, many other journals. She received a 2021 Oregon Literary Fellowship and lives in Ashland, where she works for the Oregon Shakespeare Festival and is poetry editor for the regional NPR Listener's Guide, Jefferson Journal. Amy Miller.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Vince and Patty, for being here with me. It's really definitely among friends. It feels very, very comfortable here tonight. We do this all the time. Thank you, Tom, for inviting all of us. It's really a joy to be here with everybody. So I love this assignment of, Tom actually asked us to each read a poem or a few by poets that we admire, which I think is a great tradition in something like this. And it really made me kind of go through my books and think about it. So I chose a poem by Fadi Judah, who's one of my favorite poets. And it's about snow. And it just, snow is something that I would really, really like to be experiencing right now, because it was like 108 degrees, 3 days in a row last week or whatever it was. I think it was even worse where Steve is. This is called Things You've Never Seen. When I tell it the first time I saw hail, I say I was in a desert. I'm sorry. I say it was in a desert and knocked a man unconscious. Then drove a woman into my arms because she thought the end was near. But I assured her this wasn't the case. When he tells it, he smiles, says the first winter after their exodus was the coldest. Rare snow came down, and his mother, who knew what the fluff was, but until then had never seen it, woke him and said, "Look outside. What do you see?" She called his name twice. It was dark. Snow fell, a paragraph to sum up decades of heat. He had no answer. She said, "This is flour from heaven." When he tells it, he's an old man returning to his mother. I love Fadi Judah. You cannot go wrong with his poems. Everyone that I read, I love. So I'm going to read a few poems from my new book, which is called Astronauts. I like to show off this cover because I absolutely love this cover, which the publisher chose for it. I just was kind of hit the jackpot with that. It is the entire book is about my sister and our very close and kind of complicated relationship. She died a few years ago, and she had substance abuse issues her whole life. So there's a lot of substance abuse in this book. But there's also a lot about just our time together and kind of growing up together. So this first poem is called Cop. My sister says that was the year she learned humiliation. I say, "You mean humility?" She says, "No, humiliation." Like when the old cop at the bar said, "Honey, how long do you take to put on your makeup?" And she said, "A couple minutes." And he said, "You should take longer." Or when the young cop at the mall came out the door behind her and grabbed her arm and said, "We got you on camera," then took her to a room and showed her the video, her putting on their pants and then her pants over theirs and walking out of the dressing room. I say, "I think that's illegal." She says, "Who cares? Who'd fight them after that?" Or like that time she threw a New Year's Eve party and nobody came except her boyfriend, who left early and met up with some hot chick from the bar named for a thing that gives you tetanus. Like how that bar lured her twice a week, a punch bowl of floating bodies, sweet thing and the hustle. But the real lure was tequila, its thirsty, sad sunrise over and over. Like how I still sit up at night and picture the lump-faced cop in the bar My sister, 5 feet tall and 90 pounds, trying to turn away from him. You should have seen her. She was so beautiful. The next two poems are two in a series that run through the book, and they're about kind of lessons that my sister taught me about odds and ends. So this is when we were living together. I was in my 20s and she was probably in her early 30s. Ways to live, 1. When I yell fire, my sister is stoned and watching TV. Our steaks, our oven, some foil has touched the element and lit in long flames like yellow trees waving up through the greasy rack. It's over. I'm dead. I burned our world and we'll have to find another. She walks to the kitchen, twists the top off the salt, dumps a pile of white on my disaster. Extinguished in a moment. No smoke, no word. Then back to Three's Company and a Marlboro, the scratch of her Zippo. Ways to live, 2. My sister says, take half the drug. Doesn't matter what. Acid, Darvon, PCP, speed. Tear it, break it. Go into the bathroom and empty half of the capsule into another. Then put one half in your pocket. That way, if you don't get high enough, there's more. And if the guy you're with has laced it, you'll only be half as stupid. My sister has never OD'd. Her best friend did, an oxidized angel who hovers over my sister every minute, every night, every dream, every reading of tarot or palms or Ouija. We play those ghostly games and laugh, but I know she's listening for a voice, looking for her friend's long cascade of hair. She's asking every day, every drink, every time she looks out the window at the back of the 7-Eleven, she's thinking, where did you go? Why did you leave me here? So, and this poem is going to be the last one that I read from the book, and then I'm going to read a newer poem after this one. This is from much later in my sister's life. My father was having some health issues at that time, and we were having a lot of family strife about caring for my dad, and my sister was at the center of a lot of that strife. She was actually causing a lot of it. So things were getting really difficult in the family by this point. This is called Gun. My sister hides our father like a gun. He's loaded with chemicals, plaques, peptides, and his holster of memory gapes open. He leaves it on the counter, wanders off. She finds him, moves him, worried that our brother wants this gun, since everyone around her is pointing something at her. She lives in a circle of foreign food and keeps saying, why don't they speak any English? She's waving a finger around, the spin you do when you're really drunk. And she says, who said that? And you keep your hands off him. She loves our mother for dying and hates our mother for dying. My brother goes to visit our father. Dad tidy in his bed. The aide saying, you like meatloaf night, don't you, Jack? My brother hums and Dad remembers the words. There's no gun inside our father, just a Rosemary Clooney record. We try to tell our sister this, but she's got a gun in the head. 2 days later, she moves him to another place. She keeps saying, no, I'm the one who's being safe. And the last poem I'm going to read is a fairly new one. Every August, I participate in the August Poetry Postcard Fest. looking around here to see if I recognize anybody from the Postcard Fest. We all sort of know each other. We have a big Facebook group and everything. It's a really great poem a day exercise in August. I've been doing it for about 10 years. So I have a lot of poems about like heat, smoke, and things like that that happen to us in August. This one's about heat. August, it's called. This is my cat, Buckley. He always makes an appearance. August. I've seen the socks in their hot nests, the coats conspiring, shoes also restless and sulking, once so seemingly needed. What this house needs is a hose and a yard full of mud. No glass to embolden the sun, no long songs, no lingering meals, but a swing, yes, and a blouse loose, away from the neck and lifted lightly by the wind. Thanks very much.
Let's give the featured readers loud, long, and tumultuous applause. Thank you very much, Vince, Patty, Steve, Amy. That was just wonderful. So thank you all. And thank you for taking that up and reading a poem of from another poet. So as well as your own. So appreciate it all. Let's move to having an open mic and expanding this a bit, as Steve said. And why don't I have a show of hands, if you could? We're back in gallery view of people who would like to read. I'm going to say 2 poems. We'll try first round and we'll see where we are. And why don't you plan as if you're reading to read 2 poems? And I think I saw Rachel and Linda. And I'm going to read. And Teal, is that you want to read? Okay. Teal, Liz, Sue, Mel, and I know my lovely wife, Jane. All right. I think what I will do is go across the gallery view on my screen. And so that would put Liz first, if that's okay with you, Liz, and Sue second, if that's okay with you, and Mel third, and me fourth. Rachel, Linda, so shall we do that? So that would be Liz, Sue, Mel, Teal, me, Jane. We'll go with those 6 and then Rachel after Jane. So let's, is that fine with you, Liz, to be the first reader?
Yes, thank you, Tom.
Okay, let's welcome our first reader in the open mic today, Liz Nakazawa. Liz.
Thanks. Oh, thank you, Steve and Amy and Vince and Patty. Wonderful, wonderful poetry. Let's see, I'm going to read this poem called Tourhouse of Robinson Jeffers, the California poet. I went on a tour of his stone house he built, and so this is about that experience. At the cusp of land and sea in Carmel, we enter the dark cottage where Robin and Una read Robert Louis Stevenson to the twins, their small laundry flapping in the wind, by candle, wrote and played chess, the red horse and queen now safely behind glass. Rarely working in wood, only stone, when he first began building his home, one quiet stone following stone. Santa Lucia granite, local rock, rolled one at a time uphill from the beach, bereft of a team of horses. Then there were the mad additions, a top stone from a pyramid of Giza, salvaged slabs of a shipwreck's ballast, abalone from an Ohlone Indian encampment on this land, obsidian from Mount Shasta, slate from the officers' club at Fort Ord, Portuguese tile, a gravestone nabbed from a church in Ireland that the Jeffers carried across the country in their Model T. Una said the stone turned her blood to water and reminded her of home in County Down. Robin wrote poetry in the morning and worked on the house most afternoons, while Una collected wildflower seeds from everywhere and Irish ballads. All the books he loved are veiled behind thin, gold, diamond-shaped netting. I squint to see titles as our guide points to the 1911 Britannica, the only book on display. We're shown how the couple loved to write on the wall in the den, some Spencer on a dark high beam, a line from the Fairy Queen where the Red Cross knight pursues the good. Into the bedroom we're led or read the poem about the deathbed before us, which Robin both hated and revered, and the one he died in during the unusual California snow, the same snow that fell the day he was born. I wasn't sure what phase the moon was in during our tour, but thought perhaps the tide had receded a bit since the time Una sewed white shirts with collars so her husband would look more like a poet. And one daily hawk watched Jeffers hew with stone. Thank you.
I'm muted. Thank you very much, Liz. Are you reading another one?
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to say, no, I'm just gonna read, that one, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Let's go to Sue next.
Hi, I've got two for you. I just got a new roof put on, so this is directly from that experience. The roofer and the poet. Tap, 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 knock, knock, but no one's at the door. Fixtures rattle, table shakes, boots stomp overhead. Light shines in as someone lifts the plastic shingled roof off the plastic dollhouse. She's a tiny plastic woman, the mother we'd assume, contentedly baking cookies in her molded dress and apron, father gone to work, children off to school. Oh my, look, the sky. Full-size sweaty men saying, howdy, ma'am. The dog barks, danger, but the mother woman smiles. Lemonade and cookies, boys? Oh, that's all a fantasy. The dog is deaf. A pack of wolves has breached the hidey hole where the poet dreams her dreams, dodging drips and dribbles, trusting twice locked doors. Now she has to run away through a black downpour of tar paper shards and shingles, pulling the dog on her leash, prey watching from every side and nowhere left to hide. Crouching in the fern grove, white muzzled pup in her lap, she watches the invaders shrink to her own size and spins a new fairy tale about a princess and her prince. When the hammering is done, she'll take the slender one into the newly lighted house where neither sun nor rain get in, to live happily forevermore, or till the roof gives out again. And this is sort of quite a different slant. It's called Jesus's Hand. At the sign of peace, my hand dangles empty. No peace for me. In a sea of handshakes, hugs, and kisses, I stand widowed, childless, aching, impatient to sing the Lamb of God. But what if Jesus stood next to me and wrapped his fingers around mine, his strong, brown, calloused hands with black hair on the knuckles and silky pink scars on his palms, holding tightly but not too tight? Would I feel the swish of his robe and smell incense, sweat, or something for which I have no words? Would his voice be smooth or hoarse, rumbling as a god should speak, or tenor sweet as butterscotch? Might he bend and kiss my cheek, saying, dear one, know my peace? Would heat rush through my blood? Would he wink as I suddenly realize everyone is already singing the song? that he has let go, but isn't gone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sue. Very nice.
Thank you.
You got your roof on.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Makes
Nice.
the rest of the house look bad.
Mel?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Fabulous. Awesome. Well, first, I want to say thank you to Amy for sharing about this on Facebook. I am so excited and I have loved listening to everyone read. This is a great way to start the weekend.
Thank you, Mel.
And you're not getting any pictures of me because I'm recovering from a concussion and I don't look good.
Oh, wow.
But I'm going to read two new poems of mine in Braille. And I wanted to explain that kind of the central theme in the first one is a sculpture from Burning Man called Love. So if you want to Google it and be able to see it for reference, I wanted to let you know. But this poem is called Amends. When things took a turn, I forgot how to lean in. I forgot the poetry of touch, forgot how many wrongs were undone by your hands and tender words. I forgot simpler times, forgot our alliance. We both did. And now we've gone from Rubens' vase to Milov's couple. I miss the safety of each other's arms. There, our minds met in the press of our foreheads, our bodies in the press of our lips, our souls in the press of our hearts, as their songs clashed and resolved, clashed and resolved. Love, what I wouldn't give to be held, what I wouldn't give to retrace our steps and start again, what I wouldn't give to know as the sun goes down, if your deepest self is also reaching. And this next one is much happier. It's called Allowing, or it might as well be called Letter to Myself. There. You've had so many reasons to cry. But look, daybreak smiles after so many dark nights of the soul. Can you feel the change that's coming? Can you consider that while joy can be fleeting, there is joy that lasts? Can you let its warmth wash over you like the morning sun? Can you embrace that it's finally your time to shine, that you've always had an inner glow and only needed someone to help you breathe life into the embers? Can you receive the goodness flowing to you? Believe you are deserving. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mel. And I'm glad you're recovering from a concussion.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's good news. Teal?
Thank you, Tom. And thank you, Southern Oregon Poets. It's so nice to see you. We don't get to do this often enough. Okay, I'm going to read two poems. And the first one's titled Reflections of the Rio Grande. You have walled up my free-flowing waters, trammeled me with riprap and rat-rotten levees. You entomb me under asphalt and throw bridges across my back. You have trapped out the beaver that shaped my watershed. You ditched and filled, drained and overbuilt the wetlands that cushioned the blows of my wrath flooding against the lands around me. You choke me with nitrogen runoff and mats of green algae, suck out fresh water and give me salt to drink. You drain me to dust and dead fish. But I swear I hold no malice, need no revenge, claim no sacrifice. Stop bringing me children to drown.
Ooh.
And then this poem I wrote back in 2018, and it's titled Requiem for Firefighters, and was originally for 7 California firefighters that had been killed in wildfires that year. And unfortunately, they have not been the last. Requiem for Firefighters. They read their names in fire. They write in ash. They sleep on dirt and wake in rolling smoke while forests burn and helicopters crash. They breathe and work where others cough and choke. They sleep on dirt and wake in rolling smoke to racing towers of tornado flame, to breath that works while others cough and choke. They whisper every fallen comrade's name. The racing towers of tornado flame drink air and leave unbreathable exhaust. They howl every falling fighter's name. They see the price, care nothing for the cost. Drink air and leave unbreathable exhaust while forests burn and helicopters crash. Who pays the price? Who will count the cost? Read their names in fire, write them in ash. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you very much, Teal. Wow. Linda?
Okay, Tom, thanks for the opportunity, and Steve, thanks for informing me about this event. It's really wonderful to see so many poets I don't know. I'll read 2 poems tonight. The first one is Elegy for a Misfit. Just Jonah, they say with half a smirk. Jonah out front of Woolworths, not even pretending he has somewhere to go. Chin tucked down almost to his chest, wool overcoat smelling of damp and old and gloom. Jonah small inside his gloom coat. He worked for a while at McCulley's Tack and Feed, stock and shells, but it didn't quite work out. Jonah moved often from Riverton to Cody and back again. Next to nothing picked up along the way, like a buddy or a buddy or a buckle or a girl. Jonah made friends with some boy in the park once, but that was misunderstood. Sometimes on a whim, he'd try to change his name to Biff or Wayne, names he picked up from old rodeo posters or bathroom stalls to get a new start, you know. But it was still Jonah the boys taunted, making up those dirty rhymes they hurled like broken bottles. Jonah always had 2 toes over the edge, they said later, as if he'd had the choice of safer ground. I can almost see him now, leaning over that bleak canyon, the wind enfolding him, eyes closed, and it feels to him like home. Jonah listens. His heartbeat echoes off each rib, and he thinks it's music, someone playing his name over and over, almost like a lullaby.
Wow.
Thank you. The second poem is called Transversal. Juxtaposition of elements. Chinese lantern on a painted dresser, cicadas drone through plaster walls, plumeria infuse the night. This used up town, jaded and dull-eyed, bungalows too tired to raise their shades, curs sleeping in open doorways. La Vieja, you watch her watch the rain. She reads prisms of light like gypsies read palms. A crow passing east to west, an early winter, or a cruel insinuation. Cats yowling, coupling before dawn, a reluctant lover, or perhaps a death. The dusty hour sags like a whore's bed. We cast our nets wide to haul in small silver fish and shards of twilight shot through with plum. Night rains thick, dark sleep. Your breath like the sirocco, restless. Heat pours off your skin and pools. I dive under and dream the sea. Thank you.
Oh. Thank you very much, Linda. Ingrid? Are you next?
Hello, hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much to everyone for your beautiful readings. And I don't want this evening to end. I just wanted to hear more and more. I still want to hear more. So thank you to the featured readers and to everyone who has already read in the open mic. You are being treated to my little bird because I can't get my camera to work. I was trying, but anyway, I'm going to read, and start with reading a poem by my late husband, Ralph Salisbury. It's going to be in his next book, which I'm starting to send out his last book, which he completed shortly before his death, and which I formatted and sending out to publishers. And this poem was just published in the newest iteration, the new iteration of the literary journal Northwest Review, which used to be at the University of Oregon. And then it sort of disappeared about 10 years ago, and a new team of editors found the copyright, and they are starting it up. And I sent them one of Ralph's poems and they took it. His poem is titled Concerned About My Heart. He had not a fatal, he had a silent heart attack in 1987 and then lived another he lived until another 40 years after his first and only heart attack. But he was very aware that after one stops breathing, you've got 4 minutes to, after your heart stops beating, after your heart stops, you've got 4 minutes left of oxygen. Concerned about my heart. 4 minutes between last breath, to be shaped into word or not. And what Dad lived, I see his screwdriver, as small as the pencils which scrawled on barn walls, the time between matings, and gun to drive wild dogs from the newborn. I see this tool, this shaping of steel, as shiny as strings which Dad, his glory, his banjo, strummed for woman after woman until he married more complexity than any man can foresee. I see this not only humble, but small to the point of inconsequentiality implement he gave to me in appreciation of my having grown to be more than one mouth too many to be fed, and to grow until the vast crowd in my chest applauding no more, my own song will grow still. He did in fact die of heart failure combined with pneumonia. And it was a peaceful death. The poem I'm going to read of my own is fairly recent. It's still kind of waiting to be published, but I'm going to read it to you. I began it 10 years ago and just finished it this last spring. I began it when Ralph and I were in Mexico, in the Yucatan Peninsula, which became a place to vacation, and then it became a place to go to write. And we had a writing residency in 2012. And we had just been there when Sandy Hook happened. And the news was very hard to process. And that was in 2012, the Sandy Hook Elementary school shooting, in which 21 children and several teachers died. They were first grade children. And this poem sort of sat in a drawer for a while, and then Uvalde happened just this past few months ago. And I took the poem out, and I think it's finished. So the title is still, well, title still works, I hope. On retreat in Mexico, news arrives from the north. Because I could be in New Mexico, I could be in Mexico right now, or I could have written this when Vivaldi happened, because the news is still current. On retreat in Mexico, news arrives from the north. I've turned my face to the great night sky, but any wonder I used to feel is gone. And what are the songs of birds who once brought joy? Nothing but blind instinct, the staking of claims. Which part of the jungle are theirs and theirs alone? Ways to find each other over earth's constant low hum, the wind in the palms. Yesterday, starting like any other, waving goodbye, lunch buckets in hands, and the crack of the gun that does not stop, and the blood, and the children who never. Water, great giver and taker, help me to remember how to cradle wonder and still bear witness to horror and grief. How to let protest and beauty share the same beats of the heart. All the way from the wet, level edge of the world, the long, long path of the rising moon shimmers and streams right to your feet and mine, no matter on which shore, which continent we stand. That's it.
Wow. Thank you, Ingrid.
Oh, thank you, everybody.
Yeah, for sharing those two poems. I'm next. And I'm going to start with a poem that's a collaborative effort. And we lost a poet friend of ours about 6 weeks ago, Ron Rash. And Ron and I really got to know each other at poetry class at Clackamas Community College with Diane Averill. And we both considered Diane as a mentor of ours. And this was an exercise we did. So one person wrote a stanza, the other person responded, etc. Exploration. And it has an epigraph to it. We shall not cease from exploring, and the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. T.S. Eliot. As the moon within circles the earth reborn, the ancient tide of stars appears still, yet soaring. Vivid is the path lighted by these celestial bodies, like a hallway in some German expressionist movie, guiding me toward a forgotten destination. To the very degree of strangeness, the German journey clarified the familiar. As a train jostling through centuries of angst, arriving as at a Valhalla of selfhood, our exploration ending, yet beginning. Peace achieved in standing still. So exploration, which was a collaboration with Ron. And the second poem I'd like to read is also by a poet who we've just lost, Anne Staley. And I kept reading Anne's work, and the more I read it, the more I wanted to read. This one is Muse, and it's from her book, her last book, Fire in the Desert. Muse. I am your own way of looking at things. When William Stafford met his muse, he took his glasses off. The muses continued to sing and buzzed like locusts. He felt the sunlight bend. My muses are quiet and polite, as though they'd been trained by my mother. and well-dressed too, like her. They maintain military posture and are belongers and believers of creeds and of the credo that supports humility and downright obscurity. They want the applause, every spotlight in the house on their dark hair and evanescent wings. I wait off stage, my lines responsibly learned by second grade. It came in a dream, I say. I learned it in first grade. I inherited this from an Irish uncle. Thank you all for listening. Muse by Anne Staley. Thank you very much. And next is my wife, Jane, who's just here over my left shoulder.
Well, I'm reading some very short poems by Ogden Nash. I have this book that is quite dated, but charming. So I thought I would read, I'm reading 3 poems, but it's only 16 lines for the 3 poems. The first one is The Porcupine. Any hound a porcupine nudges can't be blamed for harboring grudges. I'm getting my voice back. Let me try this again. Any hound a porcupine nudges can't be blamed for harboring grudges. I know one hound that laughed all winter when a porcupine sat on a splinter. The next one, The Cuckoo. Cuckoos lead bohemian lives. They fail as husband and as wives. Therefore, they cynically disparage everyone else's marriage. And the last one, The Bat. I myself rather like the bat. It's not a mouse, it's not a rat. It has no feathers, yet has wings. It's quite inaudible when it sings. It zigzags through the evening air and never lands on ladies' hair, a fact of which men spend their lives attempting to convince their wives. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane.
You're welcome.
Is there anyone who hasn't read a poem that wants to read a poem? I thought Rachel, I thought you did.
No, I haven't read yet.
But I thought you
have
wanted to
not.
read.
Yes, please.
You were
Good
next.
evening, everybody. It's really nice to be here. I have 2 shortish poems from my collection coming out next month from the Poetry Box. The first is called Windbreak. The dog knows the way to go. A narrow path burnished to cracked clay wanders through thistle and dried grasses. I lean into the wind. We meet at the crest in a copse of fir, follow the trail to the center, where history hangs in the dead wood, drift of moss and lichen. I stand in the quiet where the wind doesn't reach, walk beneath the gray skirts of the old ones. Lace of lichen like hair hangs on bone branches layered in stubs up the trunk. Scars record a reckless sapling or maybe a life well lived. How long have they stood here, old ones in a huddle shielded by the youngers? From down here at the foot, the green crown waving is just an idea. This is kind of a fanciful one, something light to close the evening. Beneath the light, Newport Beach Pier. Darkness swallows what is vast. White foam of tide's edge, a specter, a muffled surf. He stands at the railing, haloed in white, light so stark it erases the top of his head, his shoulders. Phone in hand, he might duck into a booth for a more complete transformation. Couples and families come and go, the day winding down, their lives already full of miracles. Who has time for a hero to withstand such a light? Just shield your eyes and walk on. Thanks.
Congratulations too on your book coming out.
Thank you.
It looked like Amelia. You raised your hand. Did you want to read?
No, I'm enjoying this tremendously. I love this.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you so much.
Is there anyone who hasn't read a poem that would like to read a poem? Then I've loved this evening too. So if we could start and give our featured readers, our Southern Oregon's featured readers, another round of applause. Thank you very much, all of you. It was wonderful. Thanks for reading, for those of us who read in the open mic, and for those of us who didn't read and came to listen, thank you very much too. So what a wonderful evening to
Thanks, everyone.
spend the time together. Thank you, everybody.
Everybody.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you,
bye.
everybody.
Bye.
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 See you again.
I hope.